Hello, my name is Taylor Lovering, and I am here today to talk about the opioid epidemic that has struck the United States. My goal is to explain why public policy change needs to occur in the United States. I propose the disease model for treating substance use disorder and urge the policymakers of the United States to consider decriminalization of opioids. There are many reasons why we need to change prevention and treatment policies for opioid use disorder. First, the opioid epidemic is only getting worse with each passing year. With the growth in opioid misuse and overdose deaths, it is crucial for us to step back and evaluate the prevention and treatment policies put in place. Another problem is the opioid overdose deaths are only becoming more frequent. In 2016, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, over 42,000 people died of drug overdoses in the United States. During the same year, the opioid overdose death count in Maine was 376 people. In 2017, this number increased to 418 people. To slow down this increase in deaths, some states have increased the availability of Narcan. Narcan is a drug used to reverse opioid overdoses and has saved many lives in the recent years. However, just increasing the availability of Narcan is not enough to stop the opioid epidemic. The introduction of fentanyl in much of the heroin supply makes it much more dangerous. Narcan was not created with fentanyl in mind. If someone overdoses on heroin that contains fentanyl, Narcan will not necessarily work. It's also a problem because in order to overdose, there only needs to be a tiny amount of fentanyl in the heroin. The research from the United States National Safety Council in 2016 shows only 4 states are making significant progress in combating the opioid epidemic. This data also shows that 47 states need to improve their public policies on prevention and treatment of opioid use disorder. Maine, in particular, is one of the 28 states completely failing to fight the opioid epidemic. One of the most important reasons to change public policy on prevention and treatment of opioid use disorder is that everyone is impacted by this epidemic. Opioid misusers are not from one demographic. The opioid epidemic is not biased. Peter Ryan, for example, was a Caucasian man with a 13-year-old daughter. He moved from Texas to Maine and was a freshman English teacher. Just 3 years ago, he passed away from heroin overdose. Many people perceive opioid misusers as quote-unquote the junkie down the street. However, the opioid epidemic does not discriminate based on race, socioeconomic status, or other demographics. The user could be your freshman English teacher from high school, your cousin who was the valedictorian of our high school's graduating class, or even your own son or daughter. The non-discriminatory nature of this disease makes the impacts of the epidemic reach into the lives of many, if not all, American households. It is also not only the user that suffers from this epidemic, but their family and friends as well. With the worsening of this epidemic, changes need to be made. One of the most dangerous myths of opioid use disorder is that addiction is a personal choice. This type of thinking follows what is called the moral model of addiction. The moral model of addiction explains that misuse of drugs happens because the users are weak and therefore make bad choices. A huge problem with grouping opioid misusers into this type of categorization is that it causes society to see them in a very negative light. The war on drugs has only emphasized this model of addiction because we put users in jail instead of getting them the treatment they need and deserve. It is important to know that people do not choose to have a substance disorder, which is why I find the disease model of addiction should be the structure public policies are built around. The disease model of addiction is exactly what it sounds like. We should be treating addiction as a disease as opposed to a flaw in personal character. We must stop treating addiction as a behavioral problem. It is crucial we put an end to throwing misusers in jail where they receive no treatment for their disease. With a disease model, it is the dealers who are put in jail while the misusers receive treatment. As for prevention, I believe it is important to consider the decriminalization of drugs. A variety of countries have decriminalized drugs and implemented a harm reduction policy. Portugal is one country that has been extremely successful with this policy change. If someone is caught with opioids in Portugal, they are not just thrown in jail, but they're given the opportunity to receive treatment if they wish. The if they wish part may sound a little ridiculous, but it is shown that people who want treatment will benefit the most. Those who are forced into treatment will be less likely to be successful. Portugal now has more time, money, and energy to focus on tracking down the people supplying the drugs. I hope this information helps spark a conversation about policy change in the United States. I believe we all want the opioid epidemic to come to an end, and it is important for us all to learn from and to listen to each other. If we as Americans can open our minds to new ideas, we may be able to finally defeat the opioid crisis. Thank you.